Of course, just as I would go live, this thing's falling out of the selfie stick. April asked me if I had used the selfie stick yet, and I said that I hadn't, and so we thought we were going to try it on this live here. And now, it didn't go live the first time we were trying to go live, and now it fell out of the selfie stick, and we're going to stick it back on. But you know what? No one's even on this live yet, so it doesn't really matter as long as I don't accidentally hit the finish button, or any other button for that matter, that would make this unlive. I wonder if you can edit these videos after. Anyway, this would be a total hilarious comedy moment if you could see what I was doing. I like how there's a thumbs up. No one's even on the call. Oh, thumbs up. Hey, thanks for the thumbs up. Whoever's showing up, let me know where you are in the world and what you're doing. I'm trying out the selfie stick here, but I want to talk about using memory palaces and Loci and Loci, or whatever you want to call them, stations. I like to call them magnetic stations, actually. And using them while you're listening to audiobooks or podcasts or whatever the case may be as you're walking around, because this can be a super valuable way of remembering what it is that you're learning. And I was thinking about it because I was talking with Lynne Kelly today, who wrote the memory code, and we recorded a episode of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, and she mentioned this device, and it's called a Lucasa. And it was interesting because I said, could you tell me again what that device is called, because I didn't catch the pronunciation the first time, and just wanted to check that my mnemonic was right. Venugo Palan from India, thanks for being here, and thanks for letting me know where you're at, and that's great. India must be an exciting place. How are things in India? Anyway, so Lucasa, and as I was listening to this, I needed to come up with an image, and really, really quickly. And so I saw Lou Ferrigno, who had played the Incredible Hulk, and that was cool. And then I just saw him reappear. It says, "Sup, Anthony? Hey, everything's great. How are you doing? Let me know how you're doing and where you are in the world, what time it is there." So yeah, Lou Ferrigno, and he's on the roof of a house, and he's just like pounding the top of the house. Now, why would that help me remember Casa? Well, because of Spanish, right? Rosemary from Newton, Virginia. I'm an interpreter. Oh, Rosemary. Yeah, I remember. The interpretation thing is very, very interesting. How is that going? Let me know. And how things are going with your memory. Lucas Van Viva, of course, has that great post on the Magnetic Memory Methods site, and he hosts the Ria from Netherlands, Amsterdam, 11 a.m. 11 a.m. in the Netherlands. Wow. So, yeah, Luca Van Viva, he has this really great, he hosted the podcast on conference interpreting and memory. You can learn so much from that. And it really relates to today's quick topic, and it's going to be a quick one because April, you might hear some sounds in the background there. She's making some apple pie. She's got this really memory-friendly apple pie that she puts together, and can't wait to eat that. We just had a nice little bit of sushi together, and been at the gym, and like I said, did an interview with Lynn Crosby, who wrote the memory code, and learned a new word, which is this Lucasa. And if you haven't read the memory code, I highly recommend that you get a copy of this. I know a lot of people have been getting it at my recommendation. I hope that more get it, because she was talking about these young students who are learning so much about force from physics and other topics really, really quickly, just by using the power of association and spatial memory, and maybe there's a little bit of episodic memory going on in there as well, especially if you know the Imperial March, for example, from Star Wars, which cannot help but have some kind of episodic memory involved. Anyway, the memory code is a really exciting book. It's probably the most important book of the 21st century so far, I think, especially if you are interested in improving your memory and you want to understand that memory techniques are very, very old, and you want to know more about how to use them better because you've tapped into the ancient knowledge. This goes way back, further back than ancient Greek history. We always give the credit to the ancient Greeks, which, not necessarily such a bad thing, because there are some tremendous contributions from that culture, but it goes way, way back. And so things get canonized in history sometimes that don't necessarily belong in the position that they're given. And so that's why cool new books come along and sort of disrupt things a little bit. And this one is a great addition to the way that we can understand memory. And so you should have it on your shelf along with, Moonwalking with Einstein, and just there's so many books. I mean, if you don't have any of Tony Buzan's books, then you want those. Harry Lorraine, Mark Shannon has great books on memory and so forth. And the whole thing is if you use audiobooks, then you can learn mobile. And one of the things I was thinking about while I was talking with Lynne on the podcast episode that we recorded is a understanding that if you want to learn faster, if you want to memorize things faster, then it's good to know your hierarchy of learning, your mediums that you go for. Rhea asks, does this book explain Loki? Oh, it explains it in many, many interesting ways. Now, listen, let me know what your question is with Loki, because the explanation is really simple. We can go over it right now, which, you should read this book, of course, but Rosemary here, I want to read this. I failed my oral test, forgot a whole lot of dialogue, but we'll try again. We'll never give up. Love your information. Well, thanks for letting me know, and, don't let that discourage you. Go and just study more and practice more, and you can definitely do better with the exam. I mean, it's a learning experience. And again, speaking with Lynne today, one of the things that we were talking about is that memory techniques are a great and wonderful and true science because you get such instant feedback, and that feedback helps guide your understanding of what happened in the moment that your memory didn't serve you. And so then you can instantly think about what to change, what to optimize, and how to improve it. So Rhea was asking, does this book explain Loki? Well, it explains Loki in some very, very fascinating ways, at least 3 ways that come to mind instantly. Rhea says, thanks, I need to get this book now. Yes, and please, send us a picture of yourself reading it. That would be awesome. Because Lynne's doing great things to bring this to kids in schools, and this is so tremendously important because they just tackle this with very, very, childlike vigor, and they don't think about it too much. But adults, they get into this stuff, they start thinking about it too much, and they don't just dive in and use the techniques. So one of the things that you want to understand, and Rhea, please let me know what questions you have about Loki, because really, I don't like to use that term that much. It's antiquated, and it's on the title of this video because it does have a certain amount of search that people are looking for it. But I like to call it stations in a memory palace. So what is a memory palace? Well, a memory palace is some sort of mental copy of a real location. Could be an imaginary location, but for many reasons, imaginary locations are better left for more advanced stages, experimentation, or some people do well with them from the beginning, but you gotta put in the time to think about whether or not that's going to work for you, and you do that by trying them. And what you're doing is you're making divisions in space, and then Loki is a spot in space. So a corner of a room, very specifically, is a spot. It's a division in space. And that's different. That corner, southeast corner, is different than the northeast corner, right? Those are 2 stations. They're not the same. They're differentiated by their location in space. And so if you place a mnemonic image in the northeast corner or the southwest corner or whatever, that's going to automatically be differentiated as a point in space from any of the other corners. So one of the things that you can look up, if you're in the buying mood for books and you're picking up the memory code, you can get the Von Cube stuff as well. So that's by a guy named Dean Von. Look him up. His Von Cube thing, I don't think it's the perfect solution. It's not a perfect fix. Nobody has the perfect fix. There's no perfect solution here. What there is you diving in and using the techniques, and that's as perfect as it gets. But the Von Cube is very interesting because it's a way of looking at any room and bam, you get 10 stations instantly by virtue of it being a room and you knowing how to use the Von Cube. And I have played around with it. I've reduced it from 10 stations to 8 because I like that a lot better. And just yesterday, I was doing some card memory stuff. I was editing a previous interview that's going to be released that I did with Florian Delay. And if you don't know Florian's stuff, check out his stuff. We were jamming on a podcast and I was editing it, and then I thought, I'm a little bit tired, I'll go home. And I was like, no man, practice some cards. So I practiced some cards, and I was using the Von Cube, but a modified version of the Von Cube with just 8 stations instead of 10. And started, well, I've practiced this before, but I led up to something really beautiful, which is 3 cards per station, sometimes 5 cards per station. And so there's no systematic, like this station will have 5 cards, just kind of going with the flow. Now that can lead to a bit of a hitch if you're not systematic, but I'm not doing this for competition. I'm doing it for general memory practice and so forth. Rhea says, thanks. Is there an audiobook version of that book? I just joined the stream and not sure why it's called Audiobook Secrets. Well, I'm talking about Loci Audiobook Secrets, and the point is that if you have a memory palace and you know how to use Loci, and you know how to use a memory palace in general, magnetic stations, loci, whatever you want to call them, these points in space that are clearly divided from other ones, then you can listen to an audiobook, just as I was listening to Lynne Kelly speak today, and she mentioned this word, Lucasa, and I created an image, and I placed it in a memory palace, just as we were talking. And if I were listening to her talk about it, I'm not sure if there's an audiobook of the memory code, but if there were, just imagine that you go into any audiobook that you want to listen to, and you have a memory palace or 10 memory palaces ready to go, and you just encode what it is that you want to remember from that book as you go, station by station by station by station. And you don't have to think about it. You don't get too caught up in the theory or the strategy, because you've got the memory palaces predetermined before you turn that audiobook on. And this is really, really good for walking, and I've practiced this a lot with walking around. But what I found, and here's the big tip for this session, is that it doesn't really work out well for me when I do impromptu memory palaces with audiobooks. And strangely enough, it does work really well if I do impromptu memory palace stuff when I'm just having conversations, like with my wife, learning new Chinese. I'm able to think, what was that for video course again? 视频课程, right? And it's because I see a sharp pin on Khan from Star Trek fighting Chong from Cheech and Chong, right? And video course, they're fighting over a video course. And there's a bit of a Cronenberg image in there from one of his movies called Videodrome. But the whole point is that it works much better for just incidentals. But for audiobooks, I can't be walking around that well and just suddenly decide there's a station on this street, and then, there's another one. It's got to be predetermined. So that's a real big point, and it's a huge point in the magnetic memory method training. It's called the principle of predetermination and the principle of preparation. And if you get those things working for you, then you're able to walk around, listen to audiobooks, and remember key points. And what you want to do then after that is really think, okay, do I want to remember that stuff for the long term, or is it good enough that I just got it into short term? Because there's going to be, and it's something that Lynn and I were talking about today, there's a certain burden of repetition that you need to do in order to get it into long-term memory. With practice, that burden of repetition can actually go down, but you don't want to get too cocky. You don't want to get too bold. You want to follow set patterns of repetition in order to get it into long-term memory, and sometimes double up or double down, as the case may be, in order to up the ante and really, really go in bulletproof that has gone into long-term memory. So that's a real important thing to understand. Who is excited and interested in this interview with Lynne Kelly that's coming up? Because I know I am, and it was really great speaking with her. I really appreciate the time that she took, and I hope that you'll all be visiting magneticmemorymethod.com, and that you're hooked up and linked up to be notified when that comes out, because she's just doing some revolutionary things and helping so many people, especially kids, learn this. Because we were talking about, why do adults struggle with it? And one of the reasons why is they think too much about it. They don't go in with childlike happiness and joy. Alan's here. Hey, Alan from Melbourne. Thank you so much that you're so glad that you're here. And you say, good, you're sharing again. Well, thank you for saying that. And yeah, it's been a while. Trying out the selfie stick here. Woo! Yeah, so the thing with Lynne's book is just, it's incredible. So I hope it's out as an audiobook. But if you're going to use memory techniques for it, and particularly the Memory Palace, please have that Memory Palace prepared in advance. At least this has been my experience. But also do practice impromptu Memory Palace material. And if you're interested in checking out a little quick training that I have on impromptu Memory Palace creation, then you can put Magnetic Memory Method and Impromptu Memory Palace into Google, and you'll see that there's a whole podcast and a text write-up all about that, and a video. So Rhea says, I should make a Memory Palace for every audiobook. Rhea, that's a great idea, and you might want to have 2 or 3 prepared. Just depends on what your level of skill is and how much information you feel that you want to take from that book. One of the great study techniques that you can have is having some sense of how much information you want to take away. So instead of saying, and this is what a lot of people say, and it comes from a scarcity mindset, they, Abhijit from Karachi, Pakistan. Oh, so glad you're here. Thanks for letting me know where you are. What time is it there? If you go in and you're trying to get it all, you wind up compressing your brain and stressing yourself out, and you come away with less. But if you go in with it kind of sounds woo-woo and maybe new agey a little bit, but if you go in with a mindset of abundance mixed with a mindset of some sort of limiting rule, then you're going to take away more. Because you say, this book has 10 chapters, I'm only going to remember 3 points from each chapter, actively remember. That's now 30 points from, say, a 300-page book. But because that you've gone in laser targeted with a memory goal, you are so much more likely to remember way more out of that book than you would if you were like, I'm going to memorize every single word of this. You can memorize every single word of it. No one is saying that you can't. But is that a realistic thing? You know, my friend Jonathan Levy, who has Superlearner, and by the way, if you want to take a free trial of Superlearner, I have a special link for you. It's magneticmemorymethod.com/SL, and if you use that, you get the royal treatment with this free trial. He and I together, we are asked all the time, I got to memorize this whole book word for word. Every single time we have one thing. Do you really? Like, who on earth, what draconian teacher would ask you to memorize verbatim something where you're going to be asked 10 questions from, 30 questions from, 50 questions? It doesn't matter how many questions. How could memorizing it verbatim ever be realistic in 99% of the cases? And the answer is that people are going in with a scarcity mindset usually, or the teacher giving that cruel assignment or impression that they need to do that much is giving them a very, very bad impression of what true knowledge is, because true knowledge does go in with laser targeted goals and fulfills those goals, and you do that by having limits. So when I go in to read something, I'm like, I want 3 things per chapter, or maybe it might be a different number, it might be 5 or so. Rhea says, this stream is awesome. First time watching you stream. I just found it by accident on my YouTube channel since I've subscribed to you. Rhea, thanks for being subscribed. If you're watching this sometime in the future, you've just stumbled across this channel, please hit that subscribe button. And if you want to be notified of future lives, hit the little bell, because then you'll get an email. And you can hop on, ask questions and stuff. And thanks to everybody who has signed in and said hello where you are from the world. Let me know if you have questions. We're baking apple pie here, but memory-friendly apple pie, which means there's no wheat in it. Paul says, hi Anthony, I have a question. Can you apply the Memory Palace technique for music? I like learning new pieces. He is from Versailles in France. Oh, what a great place. Well, yeah, you can apply it to music in many, many different ways. And I actually, in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, if you're here and you're in the Masterclass and you haven't been, Didi says, hi. Hello, Didi, where are you in the world? If you haven't been into the Masterclass recently, if you happen to own it, Didi is from China. Oh, wow. Ni hao ma. if you haven't been in there for a while, I put in a 25-minute tutorial on memorizing music. Now it's for memorizing music with the guitar, but it'll stimulate ideas, and there's a graphic of the piano in there that will give you some ideas, and it's all instantly applicable to the piano. But if you have something more laser targeted in terms of a question about music, then by all means, it might be possible to answer that, but it's a bit of a longer question. But since we're talking about audiobooks and Loki, another thing that's related here is, can you memorize lyrics of songs in real time? And I don't know if they've ever thought about having that as part of the competition in the World Memory Championships or one of the national or local competitions. There's a lot of things they don't have in the competitions because they just wouldn't be fair. Paul says, thanks, definitely going to check it out. Great. If you're already in the masterclass, I really, really appreciate that. And if you happen to join it, then that would be amazing as well. And there is that FAQ section, and it's a great way to drill down on specific topics, and I'm adding to it as frequently as possible. And I really like the laser targeted questions where I can just show you very, very specifically, based on your question, what that approach would be, because it's really important. The quality of your questions actually calls the quality of the answer into existence. So many questions are really just wide, and they're really permission based. Like, can I reuse a memory palace? Well, of course you can. Like, have you tried? Have you? A lot of people will not even create a memory palace in the first place because they feel that they need the question, can they reuse it, answered first, which is okay, but really, the better question comes when you just dive in, you make the memory palace, and then you try to use the memory palace again, and then you go, there's something odd going on here. And then you ask based on experience. And so then the quality of the answer goes way, way up, rather than the quality of the answer being, well, have you made a memory palace yet? Have you tried to reuse a memory palace? And that's not to be snotty or off-putting or, look down my nose at anybody. But, Richard Feynman talked about this, and I learned a lot from him. Hold on a second. Rhea says, thoughts on monolingual learning through memory palaces. Do you have experience on it or any tips? I don't know what you mean by monolingual learning. Please say more about that. But Feynman said, one of the best ways that you could ever get the best answers, and I heard this luckily very early in my educational career, was that you go and you try to answer that question on your own as best as you can. You document what it was that you did to answer the question. Then you present it to the person whose knowledge you want in the form of their answer, and you explain to them what you did on your own and where exactly you think they can help you as opposed to anybody else in the world who could help you, right? And then the quality of your answer that you get goes way, way, way up. Michael's here. Hey, Anthony, Michael from Japan just popped in for a while, but unfortunately I have to leave now. I'll try to make next live as well, but timing makes things difficult. Well, thank you for being here, Michael. I got to answer your emails, actually. Rhea says, for example, using a Chinese dictionary to learn Chinese. Monolingual. Okay, I see what you mean, Rhea. But, Michael, thanks for being here, and thanks for letting me know that you're here. I really appreciate that. And I have seen that there's an email or two that I need to answer for you, so I'll do that. Michael's in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, so that's really great that he was here. Rhea, I highly recommend whenever you can to use monolingual dictionaries as soon as you can. And so for those of you who don't know what monolingual dictionaries are, they are dictionaries that are in the language you're studying. So in German, for example, Langescheit has... Michael says, great to be here, no worries. Okay, cool, thanks. It puts my heart at ease because I have a email overwhelm, and it's quite a thing to dive into email some days. But Langescheit has the Fremdwörter, Deutsch als Fremdsprache, monolingual dictionary, and it is so fantastic because you're able to read the definitions in German, but it's relatively simplified German, and that really boosts your opportunity to learn. Didi says, I'm a foreign English in China trying to learn Mandarin with the Michel Thomas method. It's just putting your foot on the door. Michel Thomas is really interesting. My only criticism of that kind of stuff is you hear way more English than you do of the language you're trying to study with the Michel Thomas method. And also you're listening to other people trying to learn the language. So there's a lot of butchering going on. So you want to think, what time of your language learning journal is Michel Thomas the best? Because you're exposing yourself to actually a very small amount, relatively speaking, of the actual language you're trying to study at a moment often when you want to be exposing yourself to the most. So for Chinese, I'm using Mandarin HQ's Real Spoken Chinese Vault. And that I've been releasing some videos on YouTube of the 30-day challenge that I did. And so if you look through the catalog here on YouTube of the videos, you'll see that there's been a number released already. My 30-day phrase challenge is over now, but I'm making the videos not day by day, but we'll be releasing all of them and then actually making an email sequence that you can subscribe to and then be sent the whole sequence. And I really, really encourage people to use that because it maximizes your exposure to the Chinese, and the English is actually only ever written on the screen. You don't hear English. And it's just an amazing, amazing product. Angel is behind this from Mandarin HQ, and it's just absolutely nailed what every language learning product should be, because it's actual phrases that you want to be able to speak with people. You're given it from 6 different native Chinese speakers in each case for each question, so you hear different regional accents, and there's usually one variation of how that phrase could be heard, and then you get 6 different answers. So it's really, really great. And it's another kind of monolingual approach to learning, although there's some English on the screen. And so like in some monolingual dictionaries, there'll be some English or whatever your mother tongue is, like in a feature box. So in the case of the Languscheit Deutsch als Fremdsprache Wörterbuch dictionary, you'll see that there are some little short English passages, and it's really, really powerful to have such a small amount of English there, because you're reading the definitions in German, but simplified German. And you can find these in lots and lots of languages. I found them in Spanish, found in French, found in even Arabic. It was a real stretch to find one, but I found it eventually. But it was standard Arabic, and really, if you're going to do Arabic, you got to think, like, do you want to learn standard Arabic, or do you want to speak some Arabic that is spoken somewhere in the world? So like Egyptian Arabic, for example, that's a choice that it's something that needs to be considered. But definitely go monolingual as soon as you can, and you can get on with, I really like to recommend Skill Silo. They're a great teaching source, and they have many, many languages. One of the reasons I like italki also, but one of the reasons I especially like Skill Silo is because they really buckle you down with one teacher who gives you access to a learning text, and it's a single text, and then you have a sacred space that you meet with that person within the platform itself, rather than going through Skype or whatever. And if you go on to magneticmemorymethod.com, you'll see that I have a whole podcast about them, and I have a discussion there for you of how I record calls with language learning teachers to reuse the material later, to revisit it. And now that comes up, since we're on like the whole Loci and audiobook thing, Rhea says, thanks for recommending Skill Silo. Check them out and let them know I sent you, because I think you're going to find it a really valuable source. It's been just such a great experience that I had there, and really, really, really pleased with that. But on the point of recording your calls, Gabriel Weiner, he has released a new software. He's in the process of releasing a new software that's going to help with you recording calls with your native speakers or your language teachers. So I only could glance at it for a second. I've spoken with Gabriel a number of times actually, and he's a really great guy. So definitely support his work. Fluent Forever is a beautiful book, has many great ideas in it. Implement them and just enjoy the wealth of information that's out there, but use it. Don't save things as data for later. That's the path of neglect that never gets you anywhere. We're in such a consumption world these days. Consume. Always be using at least as much as you're consuming, if not more. Try to tip the scales in the favor of use, and then use in a way that produces. So if you're going to memorize a textbook that you listen to as an audiobook or you read, then try to balance the consumption with use. And so how can you do that in a way that serves your memory? Well, write summaries. A lot of people, they don't understand that in order to really improve your recall of information, you want to process that information through as many centers of your brain as possible. So that means the big five of language learning, or the big five of learning, period, which is reading, writing, speaking, and listening in a way that serves your memory, right? And when you have your 4 activities serving your memory, then your memory will serve your speaking and your reading and your writing and your listening. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Very, very beautiful. So any more questions before I hop off on this call? Basically, to sum up, you can memorize in real time from audiobooks, but the key takeaway here is to have the memory palaces prepared in advance, or just be happy with willy-nilly impromptu memory palaces and not necessarily being able to properly recall as much as you'd like because you don't have those loci in place. Rhea says, how is your progress with Chinese? April, how's my progress with Chinese? Someone's asking how my progress is with Chinese. Rhea.
It's getting better.
It's getting better, she says. How much better?
How much better?
Yeah. She doesn't want to say. What? 60%?
80%.
80%. I got 80% improvement. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm taking a break the last week, which I think is important to somehow to have like a fallow period, I guess you would call it, once in a while. But I'm really enjoying it a lot. It's a wonderful thing, and I'm so glad to have the Chinese Vault from Mandarin HQ as a great source, because it's so easy to bolt these mnemonics on and to be very, very excited about them and so forth. But it's even better when you have real native Chinese speakers that you can access when you want. Rhea asks, what are your memory palaces called for Chinese? I'm not sure what you mean by what they're called. They're called memory palaces. Or are you asking what is the word for memory palace in Chinese? That's a good one. I should learn that one. I do know that Shigua Jifa is the term for Western memory techniques, and I haven't learned enough yet about what the Eastern memory techniques are. But my memory palaces for Chinese are just called by the alphabet letter that they represent. So the Z palace is different than the A palace, and that's different than the C palace, which is different than the D palace. And it's something really great that I got. I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about this. Yeah, maybe I better not. But I just received something extraordinary about Chinese and mnemonics from someone who has written something very brilliant about Chinese mnemonics. Rhea says, "Oh, that was what I was kind of asking." Yeah. I don't have special names for them. They're just, all memory palaces tend to be associated for me with a letter of the alphabet that is closest to what's inside of them. Except for cards, like I don't have a name for the card memory palace. It's just the card memory. Like I don't even call it anything. It's just, okay, so these are the 2 rooms. Got a modified Von cube on there. And away we go. It doesn't need a name. But actually, the whole naming thing is interesting because Rhea says, reminds me that I sort of asked you the same question through email, and you said you're focused on listening vocal skills. Yeah, definitely. But I use the Memory Palace to focus on listening and auditory skills, the speaking. I haven't done much character study yet. I'm doing character study in a loose way, but Dee says, hi, April. Someone named Dee says hi to you. She says ni hao to you. The thing is that the memory palaces are they're just wonderful, and just call them whatever you like, or call them nothing at all. I mean, I remember a guy when I first started teaching this stuff on the internet. He was an 88-year-old man, and I wonder whatever happened to him. He had a German lover from a long time ago, from the Second World War, who he'd lost touch with and wanted to get back into German, and he wanted to memorize all these poems. And he was hung up on this term memory palace. He didn't like it. So I said, well, call it whatever you like, change the name. You're not bound to call them memory palaces. And it's a weird thing with the internet because, there are so many people I just won't ever reach because I call it a memory palace instead of a mind palace. They're out there searching for mind palaces. And so every once in a while I'll pop on a word like mind palace. Just like today I popped on the word Loki, right? I don't like to use that word. I like magnetic station or just station because it's more true, it's more modern, and it's less confusing. And we're in the 21st century, so let's use 21st century words and know the history of this beautiful art. But we don't have to be stuck with it. We can change the names to whatever we like. Anyway, what he ended up coming up with, this old dude, he called them apartments with compartments. And that's just as good as anything, right? It's just space. It's the vision of space, points in space. That's all it is. And you get them real firm and crystal clear in your mind so that they're as distinct as they are in the real world. And that's why real world or memory palaces based on the real world, I think, ultimately serve the most people the best, because you don't have to think. It's not a matter of contest or question where that corner is. That corner, also, no question, it's there. It's almost eternally there, as long as this building is here and as long as my memory can access it. But if it's the living room of Homer Simpson and his family, where is that? I've never been there. Every time that I think of it, I have to reconstruct it in my mind, in my mind's eye. And that costs mental energy. Mental energy that could be directed at just the mnemonic magnetic imagery that I placed in that corner, so I could just go to it. But fantasy memory palaces based on anything other than the real world, just cost too much time. And the memory champions, the great memory athletes who can memorize a deck of cards in less than a minute, in less than 20 seconds, they don't have time to reinvent the image of Homer Simpson's house. They just don't have time. They don't even have time to see the images that they're using to associate. Now, there's still visual things going on, but they're not recreating fish and flamethrowers and all that in their mind. There is no time. This is happening so fast. And it's just through practice. And it's a beautiful thing to practice. It's a beautiful thing to practice that's so beautiful that I hope that if you aren't already addicted to it, that you get addicted to it real soon, because it is extraordinary. The power to link imagery with real spaces that you've just reconstructed in your mind, to do it real fast. And it gets faster and faster the more that you practice it. And it gets firmer and firmer the more that you practice it. And of course, the less that you practice it, the less firm that it gets. Same thing with muscles. I went to the gym today. Yeah. And muscles are nice and tight and firm. And my wife likes them. Right? And if I let that go, if I don't go to the gym, they will get loose and limpid and wimpy and less capable of lifting. So, just like anything in the world, this sucker right here, the muscle between your ears, behind your eyes, if you want that thing humming along, then you got to use it. And so why not, if you're going to listen to podcasts, And if you're going to listen to audiobooks, why not have a memory palace or 7 or 10 or 53 ready to go so that when you hear something you want to remember, like that, you can make an image, you know where you stuck the image, and then later you can recall that image a sufficient number of times to get it into long-term memory. Why not do that? It's so simple. It's so easy. So if there are no more questions, I'll leave you with that. I hope it inspired you to take some action. If you're already taking action, I hope it gave you some pointers, something to think about, something to apply. And if it did absolutely nothing for you, then I wonder what on earth you're still doing here. But I assume that you're having a good time if you stuck around this long. And one last little thing, thanks to Lynne Kelly for being on a call with me today to talk about the memory code. I'm going to be editing that up in a couple days and put it out maybe the end of this month or the first week of next month. It was really great and inspiring to speak with her. And thanks for being here. Hope you have a really, really great rest of your day, an amazing rest of your week, and an incredibly magnetic memory from here on. Come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com, and until we speak again, keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.